NXT's Great American Bash, WWE's Evolution, Saturday night's main event, of course, and of course, AEW All In. 4 of the 20 million pay-per-views that we have this weekend. We're going to talk about it and more. This is WrstlXtra. Yo, this is WrstlXtra. I'm your boy, A Dazzle, the Black Wrestling Advocate. Of course, joined by my tag team partner. Say his name, he shall appear, the Professor, or should I say the Oracle, that is Gerard Bonner.
Yes, indeed.
Sir, how are you doing?
Man, I am great. I seem to be in what will be the wrestling capital of the world. So I'm good, man. We got a massive week ahead of us.
The weekend is looking absolutely crazy. As I said, we have 4 pay-per-views / PLEs, depending on what company you want to watch. Let's kick off with the biggest one in terms of how big it is to the company, which is AEW's All In. All in Texas is happening this weekend, July 12th, I believe it is.
Yes.
It's about to be crazy with some of the matches on the card. Let's get into one of them that we've spoken about quite often already. I don't know if there's much more we can say on this, but Mercedes Mone versus Toni Storm for the AEW Women's Championship. Let's just go straight into the prediction. Again, like I said, we've talked about it already. But any thoughts, anything different for you from what's transpired this week in terms of your prediction for this match?
What I will say is I feel like the build for this match is so much better than the build for this time last year with Mariah May and Toni Storm. We were wondering, and we talked about it here on this show, after Double or Nothing, what were they going to do to keep us interested for 6 weeks leading up to All In? And they have found ways. I mean, the interactions have been great. The battles, the all of those things have been really, really good. I think it's interesting. I saw a post yesterday from Bully Ray, on Busted Open, and he was asked what match he would want to see from All In above all others. And Dave Meltzer is like the main event. And he was like, no, the match I want to see above all others is Mercedes Mone and Toni Storm, which I think speaks volumes given how stacked this card is. I think they've done a very good job of putting us in a space where we don't know what's going to happen. It does, it has seemed for months like the foregone conclusion is that Mercedes Mone leaves as the AEW Women's World Champion. I do think there's a world where she doesn't conquer Toni Storm. But I think there's no way we're getting out of All In without Mercedes adding a 7th belt to her collection. I think she's going to be the new AEW Women's World Champion. I think they only have one shot to get this right. If they try to correct, if Toni Storm wins this match and they try to crown Mercedes at any other point, it's pointless. They're not going to get a bigger audience. They're not going to get a better optic than what they're going to get this Saturday. The eyes of the world are on them to see, will they fill up Globe Life Field, which that's probably another conversation. But however you look at it, it's their first stadium show in the States. This has got to be the place that they make that moment. So I think they're going to crown Mercedes Mone. And not just that, but Mercedes has earned it. She has been wrestling something special. All these matches she's been having, Mina Shirakawa recently, and winning the CMLL Women's World Championship. She's been on point. So if AEW wants their women's division to be viewed seriously, they got to consider Mercedes Mone as the world champion.
Given the build-up, given the fact that they have found ways to kind of keep us interested with the interactions and Mercedes winning the CMLL Women's Championship. Do you think it was the right decision for her to retain the TBS Championship against Mina Shirakawa?
No. I think what needed to happen here was Mina win this title. If Mina had won, now we have put in the seed of doubt that Mercedes could lose. Right. It's what happens to every major team right before they get to the championship game. If they have that one loss, you go, oh, they're not invincible. Oh, they can lose. So I think Mercedes needed to lose, and it would have been the perfect out to get the TBS title off of her onto Mina Shirakawa. You now have, of course, her being friends with Toni Storm. She creates all of the things. At that point, it makes even more sense for Mercedes to win the championship because now there's that little edge of, oh, no, she's not invincible. She can be beaten. But, they missed the moment with that.
But I also think as well, there is still a way. You know how we kind of try and work out this whole logic and how booking works and whatnot. Yeah. Her being, unbeaten, undefeated. In the back of your mind, you're still, after she's, retained against Mina Shirakawa, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, surely they're not going to allow it to be a thing where Mercedes just defeats everyone and then she's going to go into All In and win against Toni Storm. Could it, is it really that possible for her to just continue to keep winning? And then after she's defeated and retained the TBS Championship, she just goes on to defeat Toni Storm. Like, that just feels like Mercedes is being thrown in our face. But at the same time, that might be the point as well.
I mean, here's what's wild. I know some would make the comparison between Mercedes and a bleach blonde someone from the 80s whose name I will not mention. The difference between Mercedes and that particular person is Mercedes can wrestle. Mercedes has shown in the ring why she belongs in this space. She didn't hit us with the finger point of doom. She didn't hit us with, the punch, clothesline, leg drop. Like, she's found creative ways to win this match, these matches, while elevating those who she has wrestled. So if there's anybody who deserves it to be in this space, it is Mercedes. But I think she should have lost the TBS championship. And I do think they've put themselves in an interesting spot because the other side of this is I don't believe Toni Storm has ever won it All In. She lost at the first one to Saraya. She lost last year to Mariah May. So, we've got the Undertaker streak in reverse right now with your women's champion, which is not a good set. And commentary, if you don't put that over Saturday, I'm going to think you've missed your job because now you're telling the story of the unbeatable Mercedes Mone versus the woman who can't win the big one at All In. That's a story that writes itself. And if you paint that story, you paint the picture for why Toni should win.
It's not necessarily the Undertaker in reverse, but it's the Gunther.
That
at WrestleMania.
Yeah. Gunther has won, but
not the big one.
I get what you're saying.
In the last 2 years,
in the last 2 years, for sure.
The big matches. With this being the biggest show for All In, they're closest equivalent to a WrestleMania.
Sure.
Does this win for Mercedes, if she does win at All In, does it compare to a WrestleMania moment? Is this what she's going for when it comes to the possible win at All In?
It's tough making a comparison between All In and WrestleMania, given All In, this is only going to be the third one, right?
Of course.
And on top of that, it seems to be getting optically smaller each year. So the first 2 years were in Wembley, but the first year they packed it out with 83,000. The second year, They clearly did not hit that number to the point where they didn't even want to talk about what the number was. Right. The max capacity at Globe Life is something like 40 to maybe 50,000.
I think it's like 50, yeah.
The number that I saw isn't anywhere close to that. So again, for what your biggest event of the year is, for it to be getting smaller in terms of attendance makes it hard to compare to WrestleMania, though the thing that they have in common is that it's the biggest event on the calendar. With that said, I do believe this will go towards building the legacy of All In if indeed Mercedes can get this win. Mercedes has yet to have a win, optically speaking, visually speaking, that compares to her winning at a WrestleMania.
Yeah.
This will be the closest thing to it. So I think she needs it. I think it'll be necessary for her legacy to be able to prove that she can win these massive matches outside of the WWE umbrella.
It's interesting. In that respect, it has to be a win for her. To kind of for her to fulfill, these tasks or side quests, as the young people are saying, in terms of her wrestling career and obviously what she's been doing over the last 12 months or so. So I believe it has to happen. And as you said, there's no bigger event. There's not going to be a bigger card. There's not going to be a bigger event. There's not going to be a bigger attendance. There's not going to be a bigger visual for her to be crowned as the AEW Women's World Champion. So I think it has to happen. But I also love the fact that there is still this level of doubt that we have, where there is a possibility, albeit small, but still a realistic possibility that she may not win. What does that look like for Mercedes after All In if she doesn't win?
If she doesn't win, obviously she'll still have 6 championships, or 6 belts rather, which optically it won't look difficult, but I think psychologically they get to tell a story. Yeah, they get to tell the story of Mercedes not being able to win the big one. And we've got to ask ourselves, let's remember, let me think this through. Has Mercedes won a singles match at WrestleMania? I don't feel like she has.
I don't think so.
I feel like she won the tag titles with Naomi at WrestleMania, but all of the other singles matches she's had, she hasn't won. She didn't win the Bianca one. She didn't win the triple threat one for the women's title. Somebody fact check me really quickly, but I don't think that's the case. Now, I don't know if they're willing to bring that stat into it, but if she doesn't win, that's part of the story you can tell. Talking about not being able to win the big one, not being able to win that championship on the large scale. So I think they could do something like that with her, have her really frustrated trying to figure out how she goes through Toni Storm, have her just run roughshod through some of the women's division, and let her have that crisis of confidence, which we have not seen as of yet.
But do you feel Mercedes Varnado will allow that to happen?
I think she will.
Okay.
I think she will, because she's very interested in what will be good for the business. And so I think she could understand that, because the real question here is, I think there are 2 things at play. There's the legacy of Mercedes Mone, and then there is what she said her actual mission was, which was to elevate the women's division in AEW. What elevates the division? Is it Mercedes Mone as the AEW World Champion? Or is it Toni Storm as the 4-time AEW World Champion beating the unbeaten Mercedes Mone? That's the question. Yeah. And I'm not sure what the correct answer to that is.
I don't think there is a straightforward answer to any of the questions, which is, again, the greatest part of all of this going into All In. Another championship that is on the line, where it kind of feels as though there is, it kind of is a bit open to whoever comes out on top, is the AEW World Tag Team Championships. Of course, the Hurt Syndicate Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin defend against the father and son tag team that is Christian Cage and how have I just forgotten his name? Oh my
God. Wow. It's not Wayne. Nick Wayne.
Nick Wayne. Jeez.
Yeah.
And of course, Mike Bailey and
Kevin Knight.
Kevin Knight, of course.
Yes.
Kevin Knight picked up a very important win in a triple threat match, unexpected, but I believe as well with the run that him and Speedball have been going on, with the intentions that Christian Cage and Nick Wayne have, there's a possibility that the Hurt Syndicate do not come away from All In as the tag team champions. How real do you think that possibility is?
There are ways to do that. I think it makes sense for the Hurt Syndicate to retain. Again, kind of their first big match on a large scale outside of WWE and WrestleMania. We hadn't seen Shelton Benjamin at a WrestleMania in many years. So I think this would be a great opportunity to establish dominance. With that said, I think there's a great story being told for Kevin Knight and Speedball Mike Bailey. You know, for Kevin Knight to get that pin, again, leaves that seed of doubt that we've not had for the Hurt Syndicate. And I think there's a way to do this where everybody wins. I think if you obviously have the Hurt Syndicate who can walk out as tag team champions, but I also think you could have Kevin Knight and Mike Bailey pin the father and son team from the Patriarchy, win the championships that way. And this way, again, Hurt Syndicate looks great, but then they also get super mad. And now we work towards kind of a one-on-one tag match there. So those are the two scenarios that I could see playing out.
Yeah, in my mind, in terms of the story, I feel as though the Hurt Syndicate would need to lose, but by not being pinned or submitted themselves, but someone pins someone else from the other team. And then this whole trio feud continues. Yeah. For myself, I think Nick Wayne and Christian Cage being champions is just that little bit better. Okay. They can, Christian Cage is just phenomenal in every sense of, the wrestling world. And he could carry this thing, for forever. Sure. I think it would be great to see them win. Hurt Syndicate come for them. Mike Bailey and Kevin Knight still kind of within the picture. But I think what you said as well can make sense if Speedball or Knight pin one of the father or son team. That would easily continue this whole thing in a very great way. I think we're going to get a very good match. But I think the simple fact that it's a triple threat says a lot. Yes, about the outcome and the Hurt Syndicate losing without being pinned or submitted. I think that's gonna be almost, that's the higher percentage in terms of the outcome for me, with it simply being a triple threat. But we're gonna see what happens. Still kind of keeping with the Hurt Syndicate. MJF finds himself in this gauntlet match. Of course, winning the Fatal 4-Way match that he had. I think is he number 2 in the gauntlet now. We've seen the gauntlet matches happen quite often. We've seen, 8 to 10 men kind of end up coming out and whatnot. Do you think there's a possibility that this one is just going to be 2 people?
That'd be interesting to see. It'd be very interesting to see. Here's what I'd like to see, and this kind of feels dark horse-ish, but it'd be a great callback if they could do it. I don't know how deep into the fray they need to get to, but Ricochet needs to win this Casino Gauntlet. He needs to win this Casino Gauntlet. It's a throwback to his debut last year at All In inside the Casino Gauntlet match. It goes in line with him wanting to build somewhat of a faction to help him, go after the championship. I think now that if he gets this, he now has the carrot for other people to go, okay, now we want to be a part of this because we can see the world championship is in view for you. So I think he kind of has to win it. I'd like to see him win it, though. An MJF scenario, obviously, the story of MJF and the Hurt Business, all of them potentially having championships is always a good look. Though I'm not sold that we need another MJF world title reign. I mean, it was enough. We got 406 days of it or whatever, and that was probably 405 too many. So I think we're good with him not being the world champion. And yeah, I think I don't want the visual of the Hurt Syndicate having to be the ones to help him win the championship. It's too much life imitating art. So I think Ricochet be a good play for this one. And it would be kind of unexpected. I think it's a great place to bring Keith Lee back since they're in Texas. I think there's some real opportunities that they have with this match. Give us another surprise entry or something along that line. But now, to your point, I do think they need to do something different to be able to show that, the earlier you get in, the better your chances. But if it only goes to the first two, that would be shocking.
And I think that would be great, but I think the other part is not necessarily being just two, but even MJF coming out as winning. And if we're predicting that the Hurt Syndicate are going to come away without the tag team championships, that dynamic within the Hurt Syndicate would be very interesting.
Yeah, there'd be some friction.
Right. With MJF coming out, with an opportunity for the World Championship, them guys having nothing, no more gold.
Yeah.
We would see that whole thing that we've been waiting for, I guess, as soon as we saw, MJF having discussions with MVP about joining the Hurt Syndicate. I think that would be interesting. But it's a great shout for Ricochet to come away with the win. That would do wonders for him in his search. I don't understand why the search is taking so long, I'll be honest. I don't think it should be taking as long as it has. But hopefully, if he does win, it would kind of, quicken this whole situation up. Yeah. And again, with this gauntlet, it always has been a great time to kind of introduce people to returns, some debuts. So I feel as though it definitely has to run its course a little with a few different faces for us to see those things as well. And that's a great opportunity for that to happen. And I think the women's one will be a very similar scenario as well. Another match that we know is happening is the tag team match with the Young Bucks versus Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland. Now, we've had two stipulations or what's the word? I think stipulations is the right word. Will Ospreay seems to be coming up with both of them. Swerve is kind of like, what are you doing? But one has been, if we win, then we take your job as EVPs. The second one came on Wednesday where Ospreay was like, if we lose, we can't challenge for the World Championship for a whole year. What's interesting for me about all of that is not just Swerve's reaction, but the fact that we still haven't seen Will Ospreay become the AEW World Champion. We all thought that All In would be the place where it happens. We predicted 6, 7, 8 months ago that, that's what we're getting to. That's what we're working towards. We're clearly not getting that. He's in a tag team match, nowhere near the World Championship. If they lose, is it really something that we're going to see? Them lose and then Swerve and Ospreay nowhere near a World Championship for a whole year.
That would be frightening. It would be frightening because the question would be, what do you do with them?
Yeah.
Like they're your main event world title contenders. If they're not competing for them, I think you significantly lessen the world title chase. Who ends up in that spot? I don't know. You know, do you take Okada and put him potentially in a world championship space? Either Okada or Omega are going to be hosed up with this unified championship. So maybe one of them goes after that. Who else? I don't know. You need somebody else. And I don't know if this is where you try to insert MJF in the picture potentially. But yeah, there aren't too many people who have the believability of an Ospreay and a Swerve. And considering that Swerve really didn't get much of a rematch from when he got screwed by the Young Bucks, I don't know. Here again are two stipulations where I can't see either of them. Like, I can't see Swerve and Ospreay as EVPs, and I can't see Swerve and Ospreay not in the title picture for a year. So I don't know what we get out of this one, which I guess, again, is another somewhat good thing about what AEW is presenting to us, because if you can't really see either one, then you kind of have to watch to see what's going to happen.
It's intriguing to say the least, and then the scenario then becomes as well, if Hangman leaves All In as the world champion, you know, then what with Swerve, and here's another question, but do we want to see that happen again, Swerve and Hangman? Is that something? Are we still interested? Are we still intrigued by this? Do we want to see a bit more of this happening? Is that a thing?
I think they are very much in the Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn world, right? Where fight forever. And the one thing we've not seen them fight for is a world title.
True.
You know, Hangman swore that he wouldn't let Swerve become a world champion. You know, Swerve swore he won't help Hangman win a world title. So if we get to a space where these two are fighting for the world title, that's intriguing. I don't want that to be Hangman's first title defense, though.
Definitely not.
Because we know what happens if that's the case. So, yeah, you know, I think we would want to see that. I think we would want to see them. Now, if Swerve and Ospreay lose, then that guarantees that we won't see that potentially for a year, assuming Hangman wins the world title. But I don't know that we want to wait a year for those two again. We've kind of gone a significant period without them. They can come back and hit us at any point in time, because it's kind of a hovering kind of feud. Like, we know those two are out there. They won't work together, all of those kinds of things. So, don't know.
Do you feel they missed an opportunity in not carrying that on? Because obviously we saw, before or just after Hangman, got his opportunity, we had Will Ospreay and Swerve kind of, arguing over whether they're going to help Hangman overturn the Death Riders or the rest of it. Do you feel as though the distraction of the Young Bucks has maybe messed that whole kind of storyline up?
Sort of. I think it may come into play, and I think we may end up in a space in this Texas Death Match that Hangman's championship victory could be contingent upon Swerve assisting him. And, it could be a space where Ospreay's like, Swerve, come on. Like, if we're going to get this, and watching Swerve be conflicted, and God forbid Swerve makes the move to say, yeah, I'm going to help. I think whatever Swerve ends up doing ends up being something that we pay attention to. If Swerve helps him, then we're like, should you have done it? If Swerve doesn't, we got a thing. So either way, I think we've got a space. They've got room where they can take some things. And I actually like that for AEW.
No, it's a very good place for them to be in. As much as they haven't focused on the friction between Swerve, Ospreay, and Hangman so much in the last couple of weeks, it's still there. It's still there to be used. Hangman knows that he's going up not just against John Moxley, but the whole of the Death Riders. With it being a Texas Death Match, anything can happen. he's going to be somewhat on his own against 4 or 5 other people. It's a strong possibility. So I'm sure at some point, someone's going to come out and help. And with what we've had over the last couple of months, surely it has to be Ospreay / Swerve. It might be one, it might be both. Yeah. It's a possibility. And I think that definitely needs to be something that we see. Whatever the outcome is a completely different thing altogether.
Right.
But as you said, we're in a space where it's open, and the possibilities are still somewhat endless, of course. The other thing that got me excited with AEW this last week, not just the fact that it was Dynamite 300 and Collision 100, but it was the return of Scorpio Sky. Now, this is like the 10th return of Scorpio Sky.
Right.
About 8 of them haven't quite worked.
Yeah.
Is this one going to work?
I think it's too soon to say, right? It's too soon to say. I love how they brought him out.
I love that little vignette before he came out.
I loved it.
That was good.
Great. And
so
then
good.
To have him now backed by Top Flight, Layla Gray, Christopher Daniels, SCU. Like, I think that's all a really cool touch. The issue, though, when it comes to AEW has never been debuts. The issue has always been follow-up. So the question really now is follow-up for Scorpio Sky. Where do you send him? Where do you put him? Do you put him in a space where he's battling for a championship, perhaps the TNT title again, or I would say the Continental title, but that's going to be wrapped up in the Unified title. I don't know where he ends up, but I would like to see him have a really great run. I mean, you could argue he's one of the foundational pieces of AEW. You don't have your first set of tag team champions without Scorpio Sky. So he's a history maker in that regard. I would just really like to see him in a space where it all makes sense for him. I think he deserves that. This is probably the most competitive AEW has been. So I'd like to see him come in here and really be able to do things. Don't banish him to, some random matches on Collision or something. Give him a real opportunity to shine.
And I think that's the scary part, the worrying part of all of it is he's not coming in as like Ricochet did, for example, coming in from WWE, or he's not coming in the same way maybe a Keith Lee would probably come back. Whereas you just literally expect him to be dominant in some way because of his physique and his frame and his style. It's, to be very honest, as much as I'm the biggest Scorpio Sky fan you could find, he kind of finds himself almost in an Anthony Bowens type of situation. And I find it interesting that he beat Max Caster, but to where they have so much potential, so much could be done. But then it's kind of like, but what? Who does he overthrow? Who does he feud with? Who does he beat? Who does he step over in order to become a bigger name or higher on the card? And there's no clear answer to that. And I think for me, that's the scary part. And I think that's always been the problem with Scorpio Sky's returns. There's never been a space where you're like, okay, we're going to do this, 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 and this. It's always been, okay, so what do we actually do here? And there's nothing to tell me, even with the backing of Top Flight, even with Christopher Daniels having some level of, power or influence within, within the community on TV. Is it going to be any different? I don't see any reason why it would be. And that's the problem. But we'll see what happens. The vignette was great. It was phenomenal. He came out looking great. All of those things. And the other sad part is all he did was defeat Max Caster, who has been losing matches for the last 6 months doing this whole open challenge madness. I don't know why we're still doing this. I don't understand what any of that is at all. I just feel like Max Caster's being punished for something. that we just don't know about. I don't understand why.
It could be all those unhinged raps he did.
Maybe. But that doesn't allow for any real follow-up for Scorpio Sky. That's the problem with it. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, there's still, you can maybe get involved in Top Flight business where they had the whole thing with Crew, and there's probably a match with Leo Rush or Action Andretti possibly. Who knows? But then where does that go after that as well? So it's a difficult space for him to be in. It doesn't give me much confidence in terms of what happens next, but I'm just glad to see that he's back. And as I said, he's looking great. And we'll see what happens tentatively. Yeah. Scorpio Sky's back. Yeah. That's all I care about. Turn our attentions away from AEW. Of course.
Wait, did you wanna mention Ring of Honor the night before?
Oh my word! There's still that too.
Supercard of Honor is the night before. I'm telling you, this week is crazy. There's something massive every night. Yeah.
Supercard of Honor. So that's on the.
That's Friday night. Friday night is Supercard of Honor and SmackDown, and then all the things Saturday.
Actually, you know what? I'm glad you mentioned it because I did want to talk about Athena at some point.
Yes.
You follow this one. You run this one. What is happening with Athena? What is going on? 940 days. Not at all in as we know it. What's happening?
Yeah, so Athena will be defending the Women's World Championship at Supercard of Honor against Thunder Rosa. So they've been kind of teasing this. They've been on the same side in terms of tag teams. They've been on opposite sides. They were at Global Wars where Athena teamed up with Red Velvet, and they were defeated by Persephone and Thunder Rosa. All of this leading to this title opportunity for Athena, where she's basically 60 days or so away from being at 1,000 days as the longest reigning champion in Ring of Honor's history. So this match is going to happen at the, I believe, Curtis Caldwell Center, which is where they'll be shooting Dynamite and Thunder on Wednesday and Thursday night, respectively. So you got Wednesday Dynamite, Thursday Collision, Friday Ring of Honor, Supercard of Honor, which Supercard of Honor is the card that used to happen the night before WrestleMania that they now moved to go the night before All In. So yeah, I guess the real question comes, do we see Athena retaining the championship? Is Thunder Rosa the right person to end this game-changing streak in her home state? Both of their home states, actually, of Texas. What are you thinking about that?
It's a tough one. The 60 days and her hitting 1,000 would be phenomenal. Whether it's needed is another thing.
Yeah.
Thunder Rosa is definitely credible enough to end the reign, but I think if that happens, Athena has to end up in the women's gauntlet match.
Yeah.
And win. It has to happen. Like, it has to. Otherwise, it would be pointless her not having that championship. And they need to hurry up and do something with Athena. I reposted something on my story today where someone was commenting on, Athena's run as, or literally in AEW as the Ring of Honor Women's Champion. And, she's featured in only 8 AEW TV shows. And I believe he mentioned that no AEW pay-per-views. So, she's gone near 3 years of, holding this championship, being as dominant as she is. Only 3 defeats in singles competition, 2 of them in the Owen Cup. Why is she still, as you've said before, behind the paywall of Ring of Honor, a paywall that feels definitely way too much for what it is. And we don't even know that she's doing what she's doing because no one gets to see it. So I think it's high time that We get her in a position. If that means she has to lose the Ring of Honor World Championship, no problem. I'll have no problem with that. If she then comes away as the winner of the women's gauntlet match at All In, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah. I think that would make quite a bit of sense if we're going to go that route. I think, again, these 940 some odd days have to mean something. For them to mean something, people have to be able to see her. I think it's interesting that, she was paraded out there last year when they made the announcement about All In being in Texas, all over the media, all of those things. But now she doesn't end up on the card. That's just, I don't know what to do with that, So I hope for her sake that there is a way, quite frankly, even as the Ring of Honor Women's World Champion, though she shouldn't have to go through that gauntlet, for her to be on that card, put her on the gauntlet, and she should still win.
Yeah, definitely.
She should still win. There's nobody, I think, in Ring of Honor or AEW more deserving of being named the number one contender than Athena. Considering you have Mercedes Mone already in the title match. I mean, it just makes sense. Mercedes wins the title. Athena, wins this gauntlet, and you give Athena the opportunity to be the one to dethrone Mercedes as a callback to their, Owen Cup match. So these are the things that make sense. Let's hope that it actually goes down that way.
That there has been talks and rumors that kind of surfaced a week or so ago of the strong possibility that Athena would be the one to give Mercedes her first defeat. I'm not sure in terms of whether it was for the TBS or during the Owen Cup or something like that. But if that then means, obviously we didn't have that happen, but if that then means that she is, Mercedes' first title defense, if Mercedes comes away, of course, as the champion, then I think that in itself is a little bit of justice in that respect, or not justice, but righting some kind of wrong, or giving us something that was talked about, or the possibility of. I just feel as though it's high time that that Athena is in AEW and we see her more often in AEW, not just in the Owen Cup, because that's the only time we've seen her regularly on AEW. So I think it needs to happen. I don't think she has to lose the Ring of Honor Women's Championship in order for that to happen. But I think just in general, as we've seen in times past and in history, it usually means they lose the championship in order to then further themselves and go on to bigger things. So we'll see what happens. If we leave All In without her appearing on that show in Texas after doing the promo, after her being Ring of Honor Women's Champion for so long, it would be the biggest fumble, even bigger than any fumble that we've had in the last 12 months with Athena.
I agree.
It's as simple as that. As that. There's no way I'm looking at it. It has to be Athena that wins that gauntlet match.
I agree.
Otherwise, we riot.
Yeah.
We riot. It's as simple as
that. Who are you going to give it to? Megan Bain? Like, come on.
Yeah, like, who else is there right now?
Penelope Ford?
It's not happening.
Come on.
No.
Come on, guys.
No. And as much as some of these ladies could be, we've not built them up enough. We've not done the right jobs with them over the last few weeks or months in order for that to feel correct.
Right.
Unless the only other outcome we could get, possibly a Willow Nightingale or what's her name, Chris Statlander, with the help of Marina Shafir, maybe
Death Riders,
something like possibly, but that's about it. Not many. Speaking of women, we are going to go to where I was going to, but the Athena talk had to happen. Evolution, of course, the all women's card, second Evolution. It's like so many years later. Almost, does it feel like it's taken too long, or is it kind of like everything in God's timing type of situation?
That's a tough one. I will say this. I do feel like right now is absolutely, unquestionably the strongest that the WWE women's division all across the board has ever been.
Most certainly.
Ever. NXT, SmackDown, Raw, they are hitting on all cylinders. So in terms of the right time of it, I feel like this is the right time. I know we would have liked to have had it earlier. I know we would have liked for it to be an annual event, which I do think Evolution should be an annual pay-per-view or a premium live event. I mean, it absolutely should.
For sure.
And I suppose this is also a good time to say that if it's going to be that, then we should put more build into it. This definitely felt like it was sandwiched in between, Night of Champions and SummerSlam, and it was like, oh yeah, that's right, Evolution. With that said, I think this speaks to the strength of the women's division. The fact that there's not a lot of build-up, yet it's still an exciting card.
It looks great.
And so we're in a world where you have all of these championships that are legitimately defended. We're in a space where we don't have to go pull on a bunch of legends to make this happen, as we've had to do before. This space is alive and well. And so I think this is the right time. This is absolutely the right time to showcase the power and prowess of the women's division in WWE. For
sure. To my own question, like it could have happened earlier. Could have happened earlier, most definitely. Sure. I feel as though it probably should have happened earlier. Yeah. But given the level of talent on NXT, on SmackDown, on Raw, and they've kind of bolstered the two main shows in the last 6 months more than anything as well. With your Stephanie Vaquer, Roxanne Perez, Julia, even Lyra Valkyria. What they've done with Lyra Valkyria has kind of worked well for her and the show in general. She kind of finds herself as well in the only real serious story or long-term story within this whole thing. Although build-ups to matches, the excitement of the matches hasn't, it's not gone missing. It's not gone missing. But this seems to be the only real story that's kind of, been built since WrestleMania. Great stuff. Brilliant. But yeah, even in that, the card looks exciting. The one match that we are definitely looking forward to and we'll talk about is Jade Cargill versus Naomi. This is a tough one because you find yourself in a space where you've got the Queen of the Ring and the winner of the Women's Money in the Bank, Miss Money in the Bank, in Naomi.
Yeah.
Does it matter who wins this match?
I think it does. And I think it does for a couple of reasons. Granted, neither of them lose anything, right? Like, Jade's still going to be Queen of the Ring.
Of course.
Naomi's still going to be Miss Money in the Bank. Yep. None of those things are in jeopardy. But what I think has been really good, it's interesting. We were talking earlier about Swerve and Hangman and the distractions that have kind of taken away from that. We've had healthy distractions for this Naomi Jade feud, but it's been bubbling. It's been bubbling. So we haven't been getting weekly attacks from Naomi or Jade, though Naomi's been super consistent on the socials, right? Like super consistent, which reminds us, oh no, this war is still happening, and Jade will do things and we go, the war is still happening. The stakes are much higher now. And I'm actually really excited about this. To think about this being a WrestleMania rematch, technically the only WrestleMania rematch on this card is massive. Considering where these two women have come since WrestleMania is massive. Money in the Bank, Queen of the Ring, these two have high stakes on them. They're likely going to be highly featured at SummerSlam next month. So this is going to be an important match. I think Naomi wins this match for a couple of reasons. Obviously, what happened back at WrestleMania, it's kind of the get back for her. but she doesn't win it clean. I think this is where we see somebody come out to assist Naomi. And it could happen a couple of ways. It could be, last week, Mex alluded to the fact this could be Bianca Belair, who ironically is not formally on the Evolution card.
Right.
That's wild.
Right.
So it could be her, which would set things ablaze in Atlanta. It could be the introduction of a certain Lash legend, who, again, out of Atlanta, makes a lot of sense for her to be the muscle, to partner with Naomi. I love the concept of that. You could even, there's an argument that could be made for a name we haven't talked about in this context, and that would be Jada Parker. Jada Parker has got the kind of attitude that would be perfect to counter Jade Cargill and to partner with Naomi. Those two would be menaces together. Good Lord. So there are some possibilities for what they could do, because I think what they want to do is give us moments at Evolution where we sit back and go, y'all shouldn't have missed this.
Yep.
And so I think that's one of those that can happen with two marquee stars. And, shout out to both Naomi and Jade for showing that they've been able to pull this off without Bianca Belair present. That's massive. So I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited for this. And I feel as though an opportunity is there for a big, whether it be a surprise or a big moment. Something has to happen. I also believe Naomi should win this as well. Given that Jade won the first one, it kind of gives us, the possibility of maybe a rubber match, or at least just a continuation of this whole feud. It's Naomi's way of reminding Jade that, she's still, breathing down her neck with her having, the opportunity to face the women's champion at SummerSlam, and all of those things. And then Naomi having the guarantee of the briefcase as well. There are still so many things that can still happen regardless of who wins this match and the outcome. So I think it has to be an opportunity for a big moment more than it being about who wins.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I believe, for me, this has to be the time when Bianca kind of, plays her cards, or shows her cards, should I say, in where she stands with this whole thing. And even if she's still in between, it still gives us something to work with, something to go forward with as well. I don't think it has to be her showing, okay, I'm on Jade's side or I'm on Naomi's side. I don't think it has to be that. If we get that, phenomenal, amazing. But I don't think it has to be that. But yeah, the possibility of a Lash, Jada, someone else coming out as well, that would be very interesting. That would be very, very interesting. Speaking of those two ladies, it's a strong possibility they'll end up in the Women's Battle Royal as well. I've seen, it's going to be 30 women. Most of the ladies on the main shows are being used in different matches. NXT women, there's so many of them. Both Lash and Jada are very high up on the card when it comes to that division. So more than likely, both of them will feature in that match. Do you see either of them, or let me ask it, in a very different way, actually. Who do you see winning that match?
There are rumors of Stephanie Vacour winning that match.
Makes the most sense.
It certainly makes sense. There are some interesting possibilities. I think a lot of it depends on who's actually in the match. I think obviously you get a chance for some NXT stars to really shine. The idea that there's only one NXT match on here is kind of interesting. Granted, you've got NXT represented in the tag title match, but given that NXT's women's division is by far the strongest women's division in all of wrestling, you'd figure more of that would be present. So I think that's an opportunity for perhaps someone from NXT to be able to step up and get a title shot. But I do think a Stephanie Vicor is a strong possibility. I don't know if Julia ends up in this as the U.S. champion. All kinds of possibilities are out there in terms of who could win this battle royal. I don't know. I do feel it won't be Nikki Bella, right? Like I don't think that should not be the case at all. We shouldn't even be having that conversation. But honestly, I'd love to see Jada Parker win it or Lash Legend. I'd love to see one of those two. And I know I mentioned their names already, but I think it's a great opportunity for both of them to be able to elevate. They get to choose the championship of their choice. So they could easily choose the NXT Women's Championship. They could choose the WWE or World title. Either one. I think either of those would be a good way to highlight NXT talent. Again, create a moment that you didn't expect. And for those who haven't had a chance to watch NXT, to see them step up and do that, I think would be
I don't think I'm as optimistic in terms of someone from NXT winning it. I think the best scenario that we have when it comes to this match is that, someone from NXT or maybe one or two end up in the final four or the final two. It would be a great showing for quite a few of those ladies. I believe as well the reason why we're not seeing multiple matches with women from NXT is simply because it is NXT and not one of the main shows. There's not as many eyes on NXT, unfortunately, at this point. But yeah, I still believe that we're going to get a very, very good showing from Lash Legend. I think that's almost guaranteed. It's going to be a good showing, whether it be a couple of minutes segment, or she's the one who eliminates most women in the match, but doesn't win. I think one of those two things are guaranteed for Lash, in my opinion. But yeah, I think it's almost certain that Stephanie Vicor wins that match, simply because she's not in a singles match.
Right.
For no other reason, literally just that alone. You can't have built up this woman for how long and, makes her debut on Raw and does all the stuff that she's done. She's gone quiet, for the last couple of weeks. There's no way she doesn't win. But it's going to be interesting. In another match on the card, Sol Ruka is teaming with Zaru, of course, for the WWE Women's Tag Team Championships in a fatal four-way tag team match. I don't see them coming away with a win. I believe Roxanne Perez and Raquel, are coming away with that. But the other thing that's happening is Sol Ruka is having two matches in 2 nights. What are her chances in retaining the NXT Women's North American Championship at the Great American Bash?
Remind me, who is she fighting at the Bash?
I cannot even remember. That's so bad.
I'm gonna find out. I'll find out who she's battling. I think that's gonna be. Yeah, let me see who she's fighting.
Here we go. It is Izzy Dame.
That's right.
That's not an easy match. That's not an easy match.
That's
not an easy match. And in the way that Izzy's been built as well the last few weeks, it would make complete sense if she won that match as well. So back to the question. What are Sol Ruka's chances of coming away still as the NXT Women's North American Champion?
I think it's going to be a challenging spot for her doing double duty. A couple of women are doing double duty with Great American Bash and Evolution the next night. She's going to be severely tested. This is not the Izzy Dame of old. Izzy has a new level of confidence. She's kind of taking on a leadership role with the culling. And even her winning the match to qualify for this is massive. So I think we've got a real opportunity for Izzy Dame, but at the same time, Sol Ruka is no joke. Sol Ruka has figured it out. I'd like to see Sol Ruka retain, though I wouldn't be mad at Izzy Dame winning the North American Women's Championship. I wouldn't be mad at that at all.
Here's the interesting thing with this whole thing with Sol Ruka, Zarya being friends, but Zarya's kind of looking at the championship and all of those things. We've seen the friction. We've seen certain things not quite go well. We could find ourselves in a situation where this match is Sol Ruka retains, but then there's a friction that happens between her and Zarya, and then the next night they go into Evolution as a tag team, not really on the same page.
Yeah.
And maybe that is where the big combustion happens between them, and then we get the feud between those two. Yeah. I think that's probably the likely scenario, or the likely scenario is we get all of that, but it's because Zarya somehow, whether directly or indirectly, causes Sol Ruka to lose the championship. I think that's the most likely scenario we're going to get, and I think it might be the best one too. So whether that be Sol Ruka still with the championship or not, I think it makes more sense if she still holds the championship, at least than the fighting for something.
Right.
It makes more sense. Yeah. But again, it could go either way, and that makes it exciting. 2 nights of Sol and Zarya. Yeah, that sounds good, man.
Yeah, it's gonna be really good. And that tag title match should be special. 4 great tag teams.
Yeah, I think that match is gonna be very good. Yeah, I think that match is gonna be. I think the whole Evolution card is really, really good. It's a shame it hasn't had the build that we may have wanted necessarily. But I think it will still deliver in terms of the matches, the women involved, the pairings in terms of who's facing who, the scenarios that we could have over the 2 nights, as I just mentioned. There's a lot that could still happen, and it could definitely get very, very interesting. Indeed, keeping with the Great American Bash, we've got Oba Femi, of course, defending against Yoshiki Inamura. It kind of feels a bit of a foregone conclusion, but the other thing that is guaranteed, that match is going to be a madness.
It is. That match is going to be special. I definitely see Oba Femi retaining, but boy, are they going to hit hard. Ooh-wee. I am here for that. I think this is going to be a good test for Oba Femi, who, we forget is still relatively new in this business. And I think, the more opportunities he gets against experienced competitors, the more he really gets to plant his flag in terms of being the man in NXT. But I think he's absolutely retaining. And Inamura is going to give him a great challenge. It's going to be a fun to watch.
Do you think, as you said, it feels like it's a guarantee that Oba Femi retains?
Yeah.
We said the same thing for his last match against
Jasper Troy.
Not even Jasper Troy. Before that,
Miles Bourne.
And again, Jasper Troy, it kind of felt like a foregone conclusion until we had the match itself. And you're kind of like, right, wow. Right. But Jasper Troy is very, very, very new. So we didn't think that we didn't expect that shock to actually happen.
Yeah.
Is all of this still highlighting the fact that Oba Femi has no real or realistic challengers to his NXT championship?
I think that absolutely does. I mean, let's think about this. Inamura pinned Trick Williams, and by right should have gotten a shot at the TNA World Championship. He gives up a shot at the TNA World Championship to his tag partner. So that he can pursue the NXT Championship, which is wild, but he gets the shot. To your point, it now becomes a question of, okay, who else can compete for that title? Considering you have Ethan Page as the North American champion, and Ricky Saints is very much still involved in that picture. Javon Evans has been back and forth in terms of who he's going after, the world title, or the NXT title or the North American title. it is still very much a question of who are the contenders on the male side for the NXT Championship, and there aren't very many. I mean, that you can look at that would pose a credible threat to the champion.
Yeah, and that for me is a bit of a problem, and I think it's then highlighted even more with how good the women's division is. On the other side. And even with, you know, the young guys coming up or the newer guys to NXT or the rest of it, they would find themselves in contention with the North American Championship,
right?
You know, more than they're anywhere close to the NXT Championship. So yeah, it's kind of upsetting that we have the dominant Oba Femi, but then his contenders don't seem to pose a threat. So as much as we want to see a dominant Oba Femi, we still want it to be against contenders that still could have some kind of chance, or we feel as though they have some type of chance. It kind of almost feels like, you know, when they bring in new talent, and especially when it's the new big man, and all they do for the first few weeks is give them local talent. It kind of feels very similar to that in terms of how his title reign has gone so far. And I think that needs to change. How it changes in a short space of time, I'm not too sure.
Right.
Maybe someone from TNA maybe needs to pose a threat to him. Possibly. There are a few that could do. Maybe Moose comes around again. Maybe. Don't know. Or someone else. But yeah, I think we need to start getting Oba Femi some stronger contenders to kind of, you know, boost the level of his title reign, or the memorability of his title reign, for sure, indeed. But you know, we're definitely going to get a great match between him and Inamura. It's going to be hard hitting. It's going to be vicious. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be a big E-dream of two massive men slapping meat, as the saying goes. But it should be good, regardless. It should definitely be great. You mentioned the names Ricky Saints and Javon Evans. There's no official announcement of their matches, but it looks very, very likely Ricky Saints will challenge for the North American Championship, and Javon Evans will go against Jasper Troy. Let's talk about Javon and Troy really quickly. A complete, you know, juxtaposition of styles, size, all the rest of it. Is this Jasper Troy's chance to make a statement, or is it the smaller Javon Evans, you know, putting a stamp and saying he's still one of the better guys in NXT?
Yeah, this is interesting. And it's interesting because I don't think Jasper Troy can afford another loss this soon. Not another high-profile loss. Granted, we know he's the first winner of LFG, but literally within a couple of weeks, you put him in a match with the NXT champion. And then after that, he ends up losing to Inamura in a #1 contenders match. So you can't put him on a PLE and have him lose again, this time to a guy 100 pounds smaller than him. With that said, I think Javon Evans can't afford to continue to be on PLEs and lose, whether it is the main event of Stand and Deliver or whether it's fighting for the North American title at Worlds Collide. He needs to be able to rack up a win. So again, this is one of those spaces where you have an easy story to be told. Neither of them can afford a loss. How this plays out, I think that's why we watch it. But I think they both need to win in this particular case. They both need to win, and neither can afford to lose, if that makes sense.
Of course. Yeah, and this is the excitement of pro wrestling. It's always the best scenario when we're in this position, as we already said with Toni Storm and Mercedes. You know, neither of them can afford to lose, but both of them need to win. But I think for me, the best scenario, or the scenario that makes the most sense, and this is more of a long-term thing as well, is Jasper Troy actually winning.
Sure.
Making a statement.
Mm-hmm.
It makes the most sense in terms of their size. It makes the most sense in terms of, what Jasper Troy should be and what he's come from in terms of winning LFG, challenging Oba Femi, giving him the match that they had as well. Like you said, he lost to Inamura, so he needs to prove some kind of point again. But I think then afterwards, it has to then be a feud between the two where maybe Javon wins the second one, and then after that, they make up whatever mind they want in terms of who they want to push. At that point, if both of them are one up on each other, it wouldn't really matter who comes out as the victor in the war. So I think Jasper Troy should win this one. But again, I wouldn't be upset if Javon does win. It gives him it gives him the opportunity then to possibly face Oba Femi for the NXT Championship. And I think he could still pose a threat to Oba Femi, especially if he beats Jasper Troy, another big guy. I think it's time that we push Javon back towards the NXT Championship. But
agreed.
Because there's no one else, as I mentioned, there's no one else that poses a real threat to Oba Femi. And Javon somehow, as much as he's a lot smaller, somehow still does. Yeah. So I think that's it. Again, there's no right or wrong answer in this.
Right.
And that's the best part of it. That's the best part of it, indeed, for sure. The last thing I want to talk about very, very quickly. Time is going from us. Someone that you spoke to, I believe it was last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago now, is one Cedric Alexander. Arshay Wrestling, Return of the King. He faced Yaya. Came away with the win, but had some very choice words to say about Yaya and the North Carolina indie scene on a whole. He's been away for 8 years. All these guys are still in the same space. Why are they still in the same space? You've wasted your time and opportunities. I've done this, that, and the third, and you guys are still here. The interesting part for me isn't simply that he said what he said at Arshay. He's kind of followed this up online with other stuff as well. It's kind of like his focus when it comes to the indies. But then, of course, we've seen him save some people on Impact. This happens. Impact is on TV. The indies are not on TV. It doesn't have to follow up in that respect. But my question is, do you feel as though with the internet being the internet, everything we see everything, all the rest of it, do those things have to match up? With Cedric kind of appearing as a face on TNA, and then him appearing as the heel on the indies. How important is that correlation in terms of the attitude and the persona that a wrestler gives off?
I think this is, again, where we get to run into the complexity of humanity, right? Like, the complexity of humanity says there are certain spaces that view you as a hero and others that view you as a villain. There are things that you really, really feel passionate about and you seem to come in and swoop in and be the hero for. And then there are some other things that you're outspoken about that you just don't like. And I think this works. It's kind of a callback to Bret Hart in the Attitude Era where, he could not stand America, but was beloved elsewhere in the world. He'd go to Canada and Germany and all these places, and they cheer for him like crazy. And they come to America and they boo him. And that's on the same television program, right? So I think this is something that can work. I think it's possible to be able to go to TNA and save Tasha Steelz from what Mustafa Ali is doing while being upset about what North Carolina Indies hasn't done. I think it's very, very possible to do that. I see that also with Carly Bravo in the infantry, for instance. They are part of Shane Taylor Promotions for Ring of Honor, and they're going to be getting a tag title shot at Supercard of Honor, and they're doing so kind of in that heel position. But at Southern Honor, they're the tag team champions, and they're well loved, you know, and several other places on the indies. When they go to Heels Have Eyes and other places, they're loved. So I like this complicated presentation that says, you know, people respond a certain way based on where they are. And to a degree that makes sense. So I like it. I don't think that there has to be, you know, congruence between what happens in the indies and what happens on television, as long as all of it makes sense. And I think based on what Cedric said, you know, at Ashe and in other spaces, it makes sense.
Fair, very true. It's possible for two things to be correct at the same time, even if they're two opposites. It is very true. I think in my mind, in my ideal scenario, it would be phenomenal if Cedric has, you know, this heel persona on the indies and he's saying what he's saying, but then at some point he actually ends up being the heel in this feud with Ali, where he's kind of come to save people, but then somehow, I don't know how that happens, I don't think it will, but somehow he becomes the heel in the situation. That would be interesting. But again, you know, as you said, you know, one is, you know, very much viewed on a national level, probably, well, even on an international level, that being TNA, and the indies are not. So it can be two things at the same time. As you said, you know, complexities of humanity and life. It's just true to both. So it's good to see. I love this heel Alexander. I actually, you know, agree. It's that almost that perfect Bond villain where that, you know, what they say you agree with, but you're like, but I don't like your methods, but I actually agree with what you say. Right. So yeah, it's interesting. It adds fuel to the fire and gets eyes on, you know, what he does on the indie scene, and adds intrigue to what he can do in the near future as well, wherever he ends up, whether that be a TNA on a slightly longer term, or as we've kind of always predicted since he left the WWE with the Hurt Syndicate, possibly in AEW. So we'll see what happens there. I think we have exhausted our lungs enough for today. Time has gone for sure. You have been watching WrstlXtra on the Black Wrestling Alliance YouTube channel. Gerard, tell us where we can find you in the other spaces where you appear.
For sure. You can check me out on the socials at Bonnerfi, TikTok, Instagram, X, Facebook. I'm in all of those spaces. You can check out my work, of course, with Ashe Wrestling. Return of the King is available right now on the Ashe Wrestling YouTube channel, so you can check that out. We just announced our next show. Tickets are on sale tomorrow for Ashe 10, which will be on July 26th. Again, we're returning to Charlotte, North Carolina, Slingshot Social Club. That is going to be special. On our socials, both Ashe and mine, you can check out some interviews that I've done with Jazz and Jazz and Caprice Coleman, Cedric Alexander and Caprice Coleman. There is the pre-show match that took place where I have an interview afterwards with Ryan Rembrandt. So a lot of fun things are happening in the Ashe Wrestling universe. This Friday, you can check me out at Southern Honor Wrestling. That will end up on IWTV. And then this Sunday, I will be at Evolution. So if you're going to be in the house at Evolution, I would love to see you hang out, take pictures, do all the fun things. So that's going to be a lot of fun this Sunday. So again, follow me at Bonnerfied across all the spaces. You just never know where you're going to find me.
The other way you can do it is just say his name. He shall appear. He's everywhere.
That part. Try it. It works.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for everyone for joining us. Obviously, you know you can find me in the one place you need to find me, which is Black Wrestling Alliance on Instagram. Of course, you can catch us here every single Tuesday, 6 p.m. Live UK time, 1 p.m. Eastern. Work it out wherever you are. And if you don't want to do that, of course, you can just find us whenever you're ready on demand on YouTube. Thank you to everyone that's joined us today, especially Jeffrey Rami, who's been very vocal in the comments today. And guys, we will see you again next time.